superfluous speech. Wait. Okay.
Okay. This one is, Muslims have a great history, but now the Muslim world is too weak. What hope do you have for the current Muslim world?
MashaAllah. So the Muslim history is very great, right? What hopes do you have for the Muslim world? We have a difficult situation today. One of the great scholars of our time who writes about Islam is a man who's very friendly to us, and his name is Richard Bullitt. Richard Bullitt. When I met him, he was in New York at Columbia. He spells his name B-U-L-L-I-E-T, and he pronounced it Bullitt. He corrected me. He said, no, my name's not Boulier, it's Bullitt. And he's done a lot of good work. He has a book, by the way, Richard Bullitt, called The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. And I suggest that you read that book. Not very big, and it's not hard to read. And it will give you a lot of strength, because he wants to show that all this stuff said about Islam as the world's enemy and Huntington and things like that, he says it's complete nonsense. And he said, I cannot be quiet. He said, I'm a historian, I've got to talk about this. And so his book is very good. You should read it. A Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. Very, very good book. But Bullitt studied also things like conversion. He studied things like conversion. He has the best studies of Muslim conversion. And they are also the most scientific. They're based on careful numerical evidence. And he shows, how did Islam spread? And how did Islam spread in Egypt? How did it spread in Spain and Portugal? How did it spread in Iraq, Syria, other lands? And Bullitt shows that usually it spreads, it takes about 200 years, 250 years for it to become majority. So you might say it's not that fast, because again, Muslims never made people convert, ever. We don't do that. It's not allowed in our law. Not allowed at all. So for Islam to become the majority population in Syria or in Egypt, that took time. And he studies that really well. It's very valuable. In fact, Spain and Portugal go faster than other places. Spain and Portugal are relatively rapid in the conversion of their majorities to Islam in many places. But one of the important things that Bullitt does is that he says that when you look at Islam, you must never forget the importance of the edge. The edge. He said you have to always watch the edges. What's the edge? Where would be the edge of the Muslim world? You're sitting on it. You are sitting on, you are the edge. You are the edge. The edge is where, and he doesn't want to use the word periphery, because we say this is peripheral, this is marginal. So he uses the word edge. The edge will be wherever Islam is flowing, so that Muslims who have background in Islam, like most of you, that have families that have South Asian or Arab or other background, where people like that who bring with them Islam and Islamic culture are mixing with people like this and people like this and people like some of these brothers over here, that brother, converts. And when these two mix, then you have the edge. And he says the edge is where the most incredible things will happen. Why? I don't remember that he actually goes into that, but because of the fact that this is the place where Islam has to make sense to the convert. It's got to relate to that culture. It's got to receive challenges and have adequate responses. So many of the great developments of Islamic civilization will come from the edge. That, I believe, is true. And that's why also this community that we have, which is remarkable, remarkable. You know, it is the perfect edge. We are in a land which is at the cutting edge of technology and development and world power. It's a really strategic place to be, and the Canadians are too, our brothers and sisters to the north. And not only that, but we are a Muslim community that has incredible talent, incredible capacity. We do have that. We do have that. So it's like when we talked about the challenges and responses that we've talked about today, you can do that. You are capable of that challenge, inshallah, but we have to all work together on this. This means that we have to cohere. This means that we have to get our act together. This means that we have to build institutions, but we can do that bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. And I believe it is our obligation. And then when that happens, it can bring the whole ummah to life. And let's not be foolish and let's not go overboard. You know, let's be humble, right? Let's be humble. But a lot of our sheikhs have said in the past years that if the fragrance of God's remembrance ever comes, ever proceeds from the West, and the scent of it is caught in the East, the sick man will get well. The sick man will get well. Islam is like this. The Muslim world today has been hurt and crushed, you know, but you and I, we don't feel that so much. Some of you may, but I don't, because I grew up here. Okay, and that means that like there are things that we can do, there's work that we can do that other people, maybe you can't expect them to do that right now. They're in a really difficult situation, and it gets worse and worse and more difficult. The Muslim world is also the best real estate in the world. It's always been that way. And that's why it's very strategic. And that's why also there are a lot of people that they're not necessarily that friendly, because you know, if, for example, the Syrian people have victory, and may Allah give the Syrian people victory, Syria is the most strategic part of the whole puzzle. I wrote a book called The Islamic Struggle in Syria. I wrote it when I was at the University of Michigan, and I wrote it about the tyrant that was there in those days, Hafez Assad. Okay, I wrote that, and you can get that book if you want. But that's one of the things I began with, that you have to understand that Syria is the most strategic part of the puzzle. If Syria ever becomes free, if Syria ever is able to do what the Syrian people want to do, then the whole configuration of that part of the world will change. If Syria becomes the friend of Turkey, and they would be good friends now, Turkey and Syria become extremely influential in the world. And whose benefit is that to? Well, it's to our benefit, but not to Russia's, not to China, not to a lot of other people. And if Syria and Egypt both become friends and begin to work together, Syria and Egypt become really powerful. Because one of the main ways that the Muslim world was controlled was divide and conquer. When the colonial period is over, we will cut your countries up into little pieces that can never work independently. And if Syria stands on its own feet, that puzzle begins to change. And that's why, unfortunately, the Syrian people have no friend but God. They have no friend but Allah. And of course, we have Muslims. We love them. We pray for them. You've got to pray for the Syrian people, because nobody's going to help them in the world out there. They will let them bleed and bleed and bleed. That's genocide that's happening in Syria. Call it by its name. It's not a civil war. It's genocide. Genocide, pure and simple. Okay? So they will be bled and bled and bled, and they will try to keep no one from having victory. And that's because Syria is very strategic. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give victory to the Syrian people. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.